Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that's really impacting cities all across America, and that is homelessness.
Yeah,
So
that's a big one.
it is a really big one. It's something we all see, but don't always fully understand,
Mm-hmm.
And I think for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at this YouTube video that I found, which showcases 12 cities
Okay.
that have particularly high rates of homelessness. And it's really interesting because the video starts out and it shows these cities that are symbols of America, like opportunity and
Right.
prosperity and all those things. But then it zooms in
Yeah.
and it shows this really harsh reality of hundreds of thousands of people that are living on streets. And it's not, small towns or rural areas we're talking,
Yeah.
big cities like New York and LA,
Yeah.
but also like the tech hubs like Seattle and San Jose.
Right.
And it's like, whoa, this is happening everywhere.
Mm.
And the video uses all this powerful imagery and statistics, and I was really drawn to it. And I thought it'd be a great thing to kind of unpack together.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. It's a topic that's really hard to ignore, right? I mean, you see it every day, especially if you live in a city.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting to me about this video is how it really emphasizes that this isn't something that's happening in some, forgotten corner of the country.
Mm,
It's right in the heart of America's, wealthiest, most famous cities.
exactly.
So it really makes you question, what's going on here.
Right. And it kind of makes you think about, what does the American dream actually mean? When we have so many people that are struggling just to find a place to sleep at night.
Right.
And it's not just a handful of people. I mean, the video brings up that there are almost 90,000 people
Wow.
experiencing homelessness in New York City alone.
Yeah.
And you're just like, why is this happening in places that are supposedly known for opportunity and, having it all?
Yeah. I think the video does a good job of kind of laying out a few factors that contribute to this, and one of the biggest ones, and this is something that I think a lot of people can relate to no matter where they live, is just the cost of housing.
Mm,
Like, it's not just that rent is expensive.
right.
It's that it's increasing at a rate that's just impossible for a lot of people to keep up with.
Totally.
They use this really striking metaphor in the video about Los Angeles, and they say that the median home price there is higher than a giraffe on stilts,
Oh.
which is kind of a funny image, but
Yeah.
but it gets the point across,
Yeah.
because it's not just a catchy phrase. It really reflects this much deeper issue, and that's that there's not enough housing
Yeah.
available. And, a lot of cities have these zoning laws that make it really hard to build more affordable housing.
Yeah.
And then you've got investors coming in and buying up properties, which just drives the prices even higher.
That giraffe on stilts image is really going to stick with me.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine trying to be someone trying to afford a place to live in a market like that. And you mentioned zoning laws.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe explain a little bit more about how those actually contribute to this lack of affordable housing?
Yeah, so basically zoning regulations, they kind of dictate, what type of housing can be built in certain areas. And in a lot of cities, these regulations, they really favor single-family homes
Right.
over multi-family dwellings like apartments, which tend to be, a little bit more affordable for people.
Right.
And so what happens is you end up with this limited option for people who are, lower income.
Mm-hmm.
And it just adds to that overall shortage of affordable housing that's already there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about, the market forces at play. It's literally the policies
Right.
that are impacting that.
Exactly.
And then the video also talks about how the tech boom has played a role in kind of driving up those housing costs, especially in cities like Seattle and San Jose and San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And, we hear about how successful these tech hubs are.
Right.
But what does that actually mean for the people that can no longer afford to live in those places?
Yeah, it's tough because, you have this influx of people coming in with these really high-paying tech jobs.
Right.
And that creates a ripple effect throughout a whole housing market. So as the demand goes up, the prices go up, and it ends up pushing out people who have been living there for a long time.
Yeah.
Even people who work in service industries
Yeah.
who are essential to the city
Totally.
functioning. It's kind of a classic example of, economic growth not really benefiting everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And the video describes Seattle's efforts to address this problem as trying to bail out the Puget Sound
Wow.
with a teaspoon.
That's a good one.
Isn't that a good one?
Yeah.
I can only imagine how overwhelming that must feel
Yeah.
when you're faced with a problem of that magnitude.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that they're actually facing in Seattle when they're trying to tackle this?
Well, I think a big part of it is that Seattle like a lot of cities that are experiencing this rapid growth,
Hmm.
they just don't have enough affordable housing options. And because of the tech boom, the housing costs have just skyrocketed
Yeah.
way faster than wages have grown for a lot of people.
Right.
So you've got this limited supply of available units, and then you've got this huge demand, and it just creates this perfect storm for, pushing people out
Right.
and leading to more homelessness.
So it's not even just about like building more houses. It's about making sure that what is available is affordable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It needs to be across the income spectrum,
Right.
not just catering to the highest earners.
And the video also mentions the issue of overcrowded shelters in New York City.
Yeah.
They compare them to being like a subway car during rush hour.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, that's a really
Yeah.
vivid description. So can you talk a little bit more about like, what are some of the challenges with even just trying to provide shelter?
Yeah. I mean, shelters are better than nothing. It's a temporary roof over somebody's head.
Of course.
But the reality is a lot of shelters are just overcrowded
Right.
and under-resourced, and that can create conditions that are unsafe and unsanitary.
Right.
And often they're not really addressing those deeper issues that are contributing to homelessness in the first place.
So it's kind of a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It's like a temporary fix, but it's not solving the bigger picture.
Exactly. And it kind of highlights this idea that just providing a bed isn't enough.
Right.
We have to think about how to create a more supportive environment where people can actually transition out of homelessness permanently.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the next city they talk about in the video, which is Los Angeles. They focus on Skid Row,
Mm-hmm.
which, I've heard of.
Yeah.
It's kind of this like notorious area. And they use that as a visual representation of the crisis. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what makes Skid Row unique and what it tells us about trying to address homelessness in a place like LA.
Yeah, I mean, Skid Row, it's basically this 15-block area in downtown LA,
Huh.
and it has this incredibly concentrated homeless population.
Okay.
You see people living in tents and makeshift shelters just right out on the streets, and it's a really stark reminder of the human cost of this crisis.
Yeah.
And it also shows just how challenging it is
Right.
to provide services and support to such a large number of people who are experiencing homelessness all in one place.
It was like a city within a city almost.
Yeah,
And it's facing its own
Right.
unique challenges.
right.
And the video really focuses on the visual impact of Skid Row.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you wonder, what are the things that kind of contribute to having such a concentration of homelessness in one specific area like that?
Well, I think part of it is historical.
Okay.
Skid Row has been a place where social services have been concentrated for a long time.
So people go there to seek help.
Exactly. They go there looking for food shelter assistance, and so it kind of creates this gravitational pull,
Yeah.
drawing people who are experiencing homelessness to the area. But it also raises questions about whether that's actually effective.
Right.
Is it really helpful to concentrate all the services in one place, especially when those services are already stretched thin?
Yeah, because then it's just like an overwhelming amount.
Right. And they might not be able to actually meet the demand.
Right. So it's like this really complex interplay of different factors. The fact that there are services there, but then also the lack of affordable housing,
Right.
and then just the sheer scale of the problem in LA.
Right.
It sounds like addressing homelessness in a place like Skid Row requires a lot more than just providing like beds and food.
Yeah, I think it requires a much more comprehensive strategy.
Right.
One that looks at, what are the root causes of homelessness?
Yeah.
Things like mental health and addiction, job opportunities, systemic barriers that are preventing people from accessing stable housing and support services.
Yeah, for sure.
And then another city that they highlight in the video is San Diego. And, when you think of San Diego, you think of like beaches.
Yeah.
Beautiful weather, perfect place to live.
Right.
But even there, they've got over 10,000 people experiencing homelessness.
Wow. Yeah. It really just goes to show that it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
It affects all these different communities.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, regardless of location, climate, all that stuff.
Right.
But I am curious, though, San Diego, it does have that really mild weather. So do you think that creates unique challenges for people that are experiencing homelessness there?
Yeah, that's a good question because you would think that having mild weather would make it easier
Yeah.
to survive on the streets,
Right.
but actually it can create a different set of problems. Like, for example, when they have heat waves, people without shelter, they're more susceptible to dehydration,
Oh, yeah.
heat stroke, things like that.
Of course.
And even though San Diego doesn't have harsh winters like some other places,
Right.
being exposed to damp and cold conditions for a long time, it can still be really dangerous, especially if someone has like underlying health issues.
That's true.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that before.
Yeah.
And the video really brings that to light, too, that,
Yeah.
it's about the human cost of homelessness and
Mhm.
how it can affect people in different ways, depending on their circumstances.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that we often forget.
Yeah,
We tend to focus on the numbers, but each one of those numbers is a person with
totally.
their own story, their own challenges.
Right. And then speaking of, challenges and things like that, the video also talks about the opioid epidemic
Yeah.
and how that's impacting homelessness, especially in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And Denver's already a city with high altitude,
Right.
so it's colder.
Makes the winters even more brutal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got that going on, and then you add the opioid crisis into the mix.
Yeah. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it is. It's really sad. It
Yeah.
creates like a whole other level of vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean, the opioid epidemic has really devastated communities all over the country.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a major factor in the rising homelessness rates in a lot of cities.
For sure.
Denver is a prime example. And the video really highlights the connection between addiction and mental health and how those things can contribute to homelessness and make it really hard to break that cycle.
Yeah. It seems like when you're talking about addressing the opioid crisis, it's not just about treating the addiction itself. It's about creating a system where there's support for mental health needs and access to affordable housing and, pathways out of poverty.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that addiction is often a symptom of something deeper.
Yeah.
There might be trauma involved or poverty or just a lack of opportunity.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect.
Exactly.
And the video uses this really interesting metaphor to describe San Jose,
Okay.
which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. And they say it's like trying to solve the homelessness issue with a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? That's powerful.
It is powerful imagery.
Yeah.
Why do you think they chose to use that comparison?
I think it really gets at this idea that you can't just slap a quick fix on a problem
Yeah.
that's so deep-rooted, It's saying that just addressing those immediate symptoms of homelessness without actually looking at those underlying systemic issues,
Yeah.
it's not going to be enough.
Right. It's not going to heal the actual wound.
Exactly.
And it makes you really think about, are the solutions that we're coming up with actually addressing the root cause?
Right. Are we just putting a Band-Aid on it?
Exactly.
Or are we actually trying to solve the problem?
And then they go on to Sacramento,
Okay.
which is the capital of California.
Right.
And they talk about how there are thousands of people experiencing homelessness there.
Yeah, and it seems ironic, right?
And it does seem very ironic.
Yeah, because California is known for being so progressive.
Yeah.
So you'd think they'd have a handle on this.
Right. They've got all these policies in place.
But then you've got this, really visible homelessness crisis.
And I think it shows that even when there are good intentions,
Yeah,
the reality on the ground can be really different.
right. And speaking of that disconnect between policy and reality, they also talk about San Francisco,
Oh, yeah.
which is another city known for its wealth and progressive values. But homelessness is like a major issue there.
Yeah, San Francisco is a really interesting case because it's this hub for innovation and technology.
Yes.
All these companies are making tons of money.
Yeah,
But then you have this really high rate of homelessness.
right.
It's almost like a tale of two cities.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a theme that kind of comes up in a lot of these cities
Yeah.
that we've been talking about, like this growing gap between...
Right. The haves and have
Exactly.
the tension between progress and inequality.
Yeah, and the video doesn't shy away from that at all.
No, they really challenge you to think about what progress actually means if so many people are struggling
Yeah.
to just survive.
And then they talk about Oakland,
All right.
and they describe it as like trying to navigate a roundabout during rush hour.
Oh, wow. I can picture that.
Right.
It's just going around in circles.
Exactly. It's like confusing and frustrating.
Yeah.
And you often end up back where you started.
Right back to square one.
So why do you think that metaphor is so powerful when talking about homelessness?
I think it speaks to that feeling of being trapped in a system
Yeah.
that's not designed to help you succeed.
Yeah.
Like a roundabout, it's supposed to keep traffic flowing smoothly,
Right.
but during rush hour, it's just a bottleneck.
It is.
It's a symbol of congestion and frustration.
Yeah.
And I think the systems that are supposed to address homelessness sometimes feel that way. Like
Yeah.
they're full of these bureaucratic hurdles and dead ends.
And it's not helping you get anywhere.
Exactly.
So how do you think we can break out of that cycle?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
I think the video offers some clues, though. They talk about the need for more